here are the numbers. This is Nebraska's offense versus Indiana's defense. And if you know, first of all, solid numbers across the board for Indiana, except in one category. And this is where we talk about strength on strength and weakness on weakness. Nebraska's points per Eckel. And again, for those of you not familiar, these are drives that get inside the opponent's 40-yard line. Inside the opponent's yard line. You know, if they would have called it the super red zone, it might have sounded better than Eckel.
Oh, yeah, I called this, John, recently the blue zone. What do you think of calling it the blue zone?
The rare plus zone.
Oh, the rare plus zone. The red zone plus.
Big shoes.
Red zone plus is good, Nick.
I like red zone plus.
Red zone plus it is.
Eckel's more fun to say, though. Nebraska famously 80th in the country in points per drive inside the 40, just 3.18 points per drive. But Indiana's defense has allowed 3.8. That's 90th in the country. So when teams have gotten inside the Indiana 40,
they score.
They've done a pretty good job of scoring. Indiana's defense below average. So here is weakness versus weakness. Because if you notice, but now here's been the problem. Indiana's Eckel rate, in other words, the percentage of drives that actually get inside the 40 is less than 29%.
So teams aren't moving the ball, but when they do, they usually score.
Precisely.
So, I mean, early key. Finish your damn drives. It's like dinner. Finish it.
Yeah.
Don't play with it anymore. Stop playing with your food. Well, I'm just writing keys left and right now. But
yes,
seriously, finish the frickin' drive when you get into the red zone plus.
Nice.
Yeah. One of the other areas where there might be an advantage towards Indiana in this side of the matchup, Nebraska offense versus Indiana defense, if you notice their early downs, 24th in the country in early downs EPA, whereas Nebraska, basically an average team. They're average. They're 58.
Yeah, sure.
And third and fourth down success. Indiana's defense has only allowed 33% of conversions on combined third and fourth down, and Nebraska currently sitting at 52nd. Again, not terrible, but kind of in the middle. So here's an area where Indiana's a little bit strong here, but if you notice the matchups in EPA rushing plays and drop back plays, very equal on both sides of the ball. Both teams inside of the top 60 in the country. Indiana's top 40 in both those categories. Nebraska is just a little bit behind, but it's close enough, you know, to look at it. So again, when we say strength on strength, weakness on weakness,
we mean it.
It's spelled out right here in the Nebraska offense versus Indiana defense matchup.
Wait till you see, obviously there's going to be a lot of blue when we get over to the Indiana offense, but there's one thing that I want to hit on in particular, John, and it is the early downs. You see it there, early down EPA. They are 7th in the country, but when they get to third and fourth down, they are 12th in the country. They are a team that picks up a ton of first downs. I was looking at this stat this morning. Let me give this to you. In terms of raw third down attempts all season long, they have 63, which ranks 130th in the country. So think about that. They are seeing about 10 third down conversions a game. Not very many. If you're wondering, okay, what's the most third down attempts? That would be UMass at 108. So they have over 40 more than Indiana does. But their conversion rate when they do get to third down, again, only 63 times, they convert at the 7th best rate in the entire country. Nebraska, for the record, 45th best rate in converting and 75th best rate in terms of, actually it's closer to like 40th best in terms of just seeing third downs. This is a great offense. That stat blows me away though, John. They have early down success every single drive. And even when they get to third and fourth down, they're able to convert. This is a really tough offense.
Well, and Indiana's got the best Eckel rate in the country. In other words, almost 68% of their drives end up inside the opponent's 40-yard line, and their points per drive inside the 40. Points per Eckel is third best in the country. Now, Nebraska defensively, even with the game 2 weeks ago against Rutgers, is still a top 35 defense in not allowing teams to get inside its 40. And even when they do, Nebraska's defense 17th best in denying points inside the 40-yard line. So another great strength versus strength matchup. Another thing, you look at the EPA versus rush, EPA versus dropback. Indiana's a top 15 offense. They're second in the country in EPA per dropback. Curtis Rourke is the top-ranked quarterback in EPA per attempt. And EPA versus rush, Indiana's 13th. Nebraska on the defensive side, very solid. 19th against the run, 32nd against the pass. Slight advantage to Indiana, but also Nebraska will be by far the best defense that they have seen. A couple other things here. When you look at this, the only thing that shades in red for Nebraska is field position. And that's just simply because Nebraska, with the block punts and the weirdness that was a couple of weeks ago, they have the opponent's starting field position is a little bit better than average, whereas Indiana's is 19th in the country. So I wouldn't look at that too much as a negative on Nebraska. If anything, it's a positive because even with better starting field position, Nebraska's defense has been able to get the job done. And one other thing, and this is something we learned last week when we talked to Stats O'War, Parker Fleming, the RROE, which we now know is rush rate over expected. This means when you look at this graphic, both defensively for Nebraska, offensively for Indiana, it's minus 2.2, which means Nebraska's defense is seeing fewer runs on downs where it is expected to see a running play. So teams are a little more apt to want to throw against them on plays where you would expect a run. At the same time, Indiana tends to run it a little bit less at the same rate as Nebraska's defense facing the run. They run it just a little bit less than expected. And I wonder if this week, given those trends, if Indiana at least tries to run the ball a little bit more, even against this great defense, just because so far, they've been making their hay, they've been throwing it more. We'll see. But I thought that was interesting that both Nebraska's defense and Indiana's offense minus 2.2 on the run rate over expected. So teams throwing it just a little bit more than expected in those downs where you would think a running play would happen.
Yeah, so a couple things there. It says that they're aggressive and that they're happy to throw the ball.
Yes.
Which makes sense given that they are one of the best passing offenses in the country. I mentioned this earlier, though. Nebraska shutting down the run game, it would be massive because then I think that Indiana perhaps wouldn't be able to be as good, just given that maybe it makes them a little bit more one-dimensional.
And now Josh has the weather report.
Yeah, so you did this earlier in the week, and it was perfect because I had planned on taking a look at things from the radar charts a little bit more. And so what I decided to do was I overlaid Nebraska on top of Indiana. So if you're watching with us on the YouTube page, the lighter lines, those are Indiana's. The darker lines, those are Nebraska's. And so, John, what's one of the things that you've been saying since Monday? Strength on strength. And sure enough, you see this. The first graphic that we are discussing is Nebraska's offense versus Indiana's defense. And how many edges do we see Nebraska having in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? 5 of them. Otherwise, Indiana with a couple of slight edges. But, I mean, really, these teams seem very, very even when Nebraska's offense has the ball versus that Indiana defense. I don't know if anything in particular stood out to you when looking at this one on Monday or now when you see them on top of each other. And by the way, we got all this stuff from GameOnPaper.com. But again, very, very even in terms. I mean, there is a couple of these, John, where they are literally like in the same spot.
Havoc, for example. Yes. Nebraska's defense has been good at creating havoc. Nebraska's offense good at preventing havoc. Indiana's defense good at not allowing it. So that's almost identical. The passing success rate, which is, basically a percentage of time you're staying ahead of you're being ahead of the change, you're on schedule. Both teams very identical. Nebraska offense, Indiana defense. Yeah, and then the one area where it's the glaring weakness is the rush explosion. Indiana's defense has given up some explosive run plays, but Nebraska's offense hasn't created many. So strength, weakness.
Yep, exactly. And then you look at Nebraska's defense versus Indiana's offense, and I do think this is where the matchup can look a little tougher just because there are a couple spots where Nebraska is not that far off. Again, Havoc, they're not that far off. EPA per play, they're not that far off. Passing success rate, passing EPA, they're not that far off. But, dude, there are a couple of these spots where Indiana looks to be a much, much better group. Late down success rate. Nebraska has struggled, and obviously we have seen that. Indiana has been tremendous. And that goes back, honestly, to one of the stats that we were just talking about. Line yards, Indiana, a whole lot better. Explosiveness, Indiana, a whole lot better. Early downs, they are essentially the same again. So that... Continuing to look at that metric from a few minutes ago, Nebraska having success on early downs. Are they able to do so? Because if they can, it puts them in long down situations. Again, Indiana's been very good in those situations, but at the very least, you'd rather them have 3rd and 9 versus 3rd and 4, because at least then it's a predictable situation in terms of if they are rushing or passing the football.
A couple of things I wanted to share. Max Olson, friend of the program from ESPN now, is still doing his stop rate. Now, this is a very simple formula. There's nothing nerdy about this. This is very simply how many times does a defense force a turnover or a punt or a loss of on downs?
Yeah.
What's the percentage of time they stop teams? Nebraska's stop rate is 6th in the country. 79.6% of drives get stopped. 6th best in the country. Only Texas, Army, Tennessee, Ohio State, and Notre Dame are ahead. And all of those teams right now are squarely in the national championship conversation or the playoff conversation. Indiana just happens to make this chart, which is why I extended it out to number 16. Indiana, number 16 in stop rate. 72% of the drives end in either a turnover, loss on downs, or a punt. So, again, just a really, really, really intriguing matchup coming up, because one thing's for certain, there's going to be a unit in this game that is going to take it on the chin to a degree, whether it's Nebraska's defense, Indiana's offense, or the potential for maybe Nebraska's offense to really do something special against a defense that really hasn't not been threatened very much either. And this is where I think turnovers comes in huge, because the one time, well, I guess they were challenged a bit at Northwestern, but when they went -4 against Maryland,
yeah.
If Nebraska could duplicate that, they are definitely going to win, because Nebraska, I can confidently say, at least since I've been keeping track of the numbers, has never lost a game where they were +4 in the turnover margin.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Doc wants to know, does Indiana's quarterback use his feet? Nebraska will be in trouble if they face a team with a quarterback that can use his feet to gain a first down or to extend a play. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think that Curtis Rourke does have some mobility to him in terms of being able to move in and around the pocket. He only has 44 rushing yards on the year. His long rush is 12. He has been sacked 5 times. So he has 16 rushes where he was able to gain 0 or more yards. I think that could be a problem if Nebraska is unable to take him down. He is not going to, I don't want to say he's not going to beat you with his feet. He can definitely make things a pain in the butt for you. He is not a dual threat quarterback, though. He is not a quarterback like that.
No, he is not.